Hello again, and welcome to the Soccer Media Podcast. I'm John Shrader. This is our weekly look at the soccer media business and the business of soccer. And the business of soccer in 2026 is the World Cup and Major League Soccer and much more. And a gentleman who can help us talk a little bit about that business is Steve Cangialosi, the longtime announcer in Major League Soccer, and now beginning his fourth year with the Apple TV folks. Native New Yorker who's spending a little bit more time on the West Coast than he expected to. Steve, thanks for your time.
Thanks a lot, John. 27 inches of snow in my neck of the woods in northern New Jersey. So I was in Seattle last weekend. They decided to keep me out west rather than try to get back home and then fly back to Utah just 2 days later. So I've had some time here on the West Coast. There are worse places to be stuck.
Absolutely. And as you know, I spent, almost 40 years on the West Coast, and I absolutely miss it almost every day. Traffic notwithstanding of those cities. But you kind of got lucky in this respect in that you get to see, and you were planning it anyway, but you get a close-up view of Seattle for the first couple of weeks of the season.
Yeah, and they're always players in MLS, aren't they? This is a very well-run team. Craig Weibel, who is the general manager, and the team coached by Brian Schmetzer, they have a clue, if I could put it that way. They know how to construct a team without making the boldest signings compared to some of the other so-called sexier teams in Major League Soccer. And it's one of those situations, I know you're a former hockey guy, as I am. Martin Brodeur, I used to do the New Jersey Devils, would say back in his heyday, every year we construct a team that we believe can win the Stanley Cup. And we have Seattle Sounders who have this organization and a team, and they put their players in position where every year out of training camp, they believe they can win MLS Cup. There's that much confidence in these parts.
And, from the John Shrader School of Talk About Me, the School of Talking About Me, Craig Weibel survived, a couple of seasons with me in the broadcast booth when he was back in San Jose. And he's done a great job and a couple of stops in Major League Soccer and learned a lot along the way.
Well, think about how different it is now, too, because the reach globally has far exceeded anything of MLS 1.0 or 2.0. They say we're in 3.0 now, John, a different day and a different era for the league.
Well, 3.0 means you're in South America and you're in Europe and you're in Asia and maybe you're in Antarctica too. I don't know. I guess it's a great thing. I was going to ask you about this in a couple of minutes, but I might as well do it now. Apple TV made a major business decision and said, we're not going to charge $80 anymore for the MLS season pass. If you have your handy dandy Apple phone, which I do, my son-in-law works for Apple, and of course I have this Apple phone. And if I have an Apple subscription, then I can watch you guys anywhere, anytime on any device, right? Anywhere in the world. And that's not what you get when you go to most other places in the world and you try to consume American media.
I guess we're all about to find out what not being behind the double paywall means at this point. And we'll start to get our answers, I assume, in a couple of weeks. I've been part of the operation here. This is the fourth season where MLS is on Apple TV exclusively. And I can tell you this, I think the wonderful thing that I experienced was, for the first time, just seeing MLS promoted within the other television offerings of the Apple brand. Because if you have Apple TV, there are some really, really critically acclaimed shows, whether it's Severance or Ted Lasso or Shrinking or Hijack. And to see the MLS promo run just before episodes of that game, I can't put a value on that, but I would believe that it is immense. So we're entering this new era now where we've made it more accessible. And in a World Cup year, John, I think it has to be that way. You want to get the game in front of as many eyeballs as humanly possible.
Yeah, and I'm not going to ask you to respond to this, but my view of it has been, and I think there's a number of others, is that this was probably inevitable that soccer was going to the streaming world, but maybe it was a little early. And I think every year, this is as a reporter and an observer, Apple has made a little tweak here and a little tweak there and a little tweak there. And then maybe by the time, we get to season 5 or 6, it'll be exactly the product they want the whole world to see, I think.
And I think part of that is the world catching up a little bit as
Mhm.
well. I mean, I just know what the cable industry is like at this point, and it seems to be going only one way in this year 2026. So I think more and more the model will work. Just looking back on the last few years, what I'm proud of, if not distribution, was the product, because I know a lot of people who put their heart and souls into this for the last 4 years, and I think there's a lot we can be proud of to this point.
Yeah, and I do agree as a sort of critic of this, the quality of the broadcasting, the quality of the announcers. There was some controversy in the beginning about a number of longtime MLS announcers not being included in the pool, but the quality of the broadcast has been pretty darn consistently good. I'll say that for sure.
Thank you, and we appreciate that. I have the luxury every weekend of working with, let's face it, a world-class color commentator. Danny Higginbotham is one of the best in the world. I know soccer fans in the United States are very familiar with him, with his work on NBC for the Premier League, but MLS is extremely important to him, and he brings it to the table every week. That's the gift for me.
You interview really professional people and they start introducing subjects that you have on your list and they do it for you. I wanted to ask you about Danny. I don't know him well, but I have interviewed him and watched his work for a long time. How is it that you guys got such a good chemistry going pretty early on? I mean, you have the advantage of working with the same guy a lot, if not always. How do you build that chemistry?
Well, I do appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate the compliment, and I'll gear it towards him as well, obviously. We only worked together sparingly, John, prior to the
Wow.
Apple project.
Hmm.
We did 2 games, I believe, in total on ESPN. One of the producers there, Chris Alexopoulos, paired us for a couple of games, and we enjoyed them immensely. And quite frankly, when ESPN lost the rights, I wondered whether I'd ever work with him again. Sure enough, it turns out that the people calling the shots at MLS decided to make pairings. They thought Danny and I, two East Coast guys that probably played into the decision somewhat, him in Philadelphia, me in New York. And I think after a couple of games, it worked. We developed a rapport. We are two very different people. He spent his life in soccer, or football, as it was called in England, as still is today. And I spent my life really as a journalist and a television announcer across the broad spectrum of sports. My background is basically an American sportscaster who fell in love with soccer some 20 years ago. For him, the game is ingrained his entire life. Obviously, you have interviewed him, you know his background, a Gibraltar international, got to play for the national team there, and experience across Europe playing in the Premier League by the time he was 19 years old. A talented player and well thought out. I think the thing that made the marriage, the broadcast marriage, very easy for me is that right away he brings you in as an equal. He wants to know where I want to go in a broadcast. And that relationship is critical, I think, because the truth is, it's like a member of your family. We're on the road together every week practically for about a 9-month span, because we'll go deep into the playoffs, he and I, traditionally. So it starts in February, it ends in November, and inevitably that's a relationship that really needs to click. Otherwise, you're just going to drive yourself crazy.
Yeah, you're a hockey guy as well. I'm going to talk to you about that in just a second. But in the early part of this 21st century, you got into the soccer biz, working as I don't know, am I describing this correctly? As like the third guy on the New York broadcast? Was it still the Metrostars then? Help me. It
Yeah,
was still the Metrostars, yeah?
2002 was my first season, and it's interesting that you bring that up because my role at the MSG network at the time, I was anchoring MSG Sports Desk, which was the
Mhm.
nightly studio show, and at the time, a very important source of information for New York sports fans. The world's changed a lot since then. I remember my late boss, Leon Schweier, bless his soul, brought me into his office one day. He was also the producer of Yankee baseball, multiple Emmy winner, very respected man in the business. And he said, this is a year where things are going to change. We're going to produce the MLS games for the Metro Stars. I want you on that broadcast, and I want you to be the host and sideline reporter and fill in play-by-play when JP Dellacamera is unavailable. And I said, Leon, I love soccer. I love the idea, but soccer guys can smell somebody who doesn't belong from a mile away. And he said, no, you're good. You're the right fit for this. I want you on it. And very unexpectedly, John, that conversation with my former boss began what is now a 24-year labor of love for this league.
So you are a student of the JP Dellacamera School of Soccer Broadcasting. Is that right?
Yep. And we still speak periodically. It was one of the things that you don't plan, but it winds up being something that really works to your advantage. Being the number two to somebody else who is so in demand. And that's how I got to sharpen my skills before I became a full-time soccer play-by-play man. JP Dellacamera was always on call for national networks, whether it was doing the World Cup for ESPN, whether it was doing NBC, whether it was doing Fox when they had the MLS package. And every time he needed a week off, it was me who would fill in. And that was also the situation for me in the NHL, because with the Devils, I was the number two for 5 years to Doc Emmerich, who always had national television commitments on weekends. So I was, in effect, John, the busiest backup guy, both in MLS and the NHL for a long time. And it gave me the opportunity to work on that platform regularly at an earlier age.
I have to believe, and I know JP very well, and I know this is the way he is, and Doc Emmerich, I'm sure, is the same, that there's a guy who needs to learn how to do this, and I'm going to do everything I can to help him be successful. Is that true?
Yeah, and JP was an immense source of information when I was, stretching my soccer legs for the first time. An absolute professional who has always done things for the right reasons and the right way. He taught me how to do homework properly. He taught me how television is different from other mediums, where the pictures are the things that are going to speak most to the viewers. Your job is to simply shepherd the information. And for lack of a better description, John, don't get in the way of the visuals. The visuals are television. That's why we're watching and we're not listening. And he was an immense source of help on those lines.
And an underrated part of what we do in television as play-by-play announcers, and I will give Kevin Burkhardt a nod here, and that is to make your partner on television the star of the show as much as possible, right? I mean, your job is to make sure that the audience gets everything they can from Higginbotham or whoever you're working with. And I don't think that people at home understand how much you, the play-by-play guy, have a role in that.
I think most television executives, the good ones, will tell you that the marriage on the air is generally cut up this way. 70-30, the play-by-play guy will be heard 70% of the time. The color analyst will be heard 30% of the time. But very often, and Danny's the one who brought that to the table when we first talked about this before we did our first game together, it's you, and I'm there to fill in the blanks and explain things. So what my job is basically to set it up factually, and he explains it. I'm dating myself here, but I was a fan of Tim McCarver when he did baseball, the late, great Tim McCarver. And I think Tim used to keep an index card in the early days in front of him with the word because that was the key phrase, and it reminded him of why he was there. He's not there to tell you what's happening. He's there to tell you why it's happening. And Danny is as good at that as anyone, and he doesn't go for the jugular. He's there to explain tactically, and I think we kind of got that mix right pretty early, and that's one of the things I'm most proud of.
Danny, the Gibraltar and UK guy, reminds me of this sort of contrast in announcing styles on this side of the Atlantic and the other side of the Atlantic. And really, the European announcers more talk right through the goal. It's the goal, and they talk right through it. In American broadcasting and almost everything, we are goal, and then we lay out and the crowd goes crazy. We see them celebrating. Color guy jumps in. Do you feel that difference in style, and do you think about that at all?
I have a philosophy that the moment belongs to the player and nothing else. So, yes, inevitably on Saturday at some point, unless it's a nil-nil game, and I hope it doesn't, you will hear me say, shot, goal, and the Sounders lead 1-0. And then I'll let it breathe a little bit. And probably there will be one more half a sentence to punctuate the moment. For instance, for the World Cup bound Diego Luna, his first goal of the season. Lay out more, and then the analyst come in. To me, that's not a differentiation between what it is in Europe and what it is in the United States. To me, it's the way the moment should be delivered for the audience. It's the player's moment. It's not ours in the booth.
Yeah. And I think that the audience doesn't have to understand that nuance. They just have to understand the game. They have to enjoy what you're doing, and that's your job. And you also have to be true to yourself, to your own values in the broadcast as well, don't you?
Yes. And, everybody in the league is watching. That's the one thing I've learned. They know if you've done your homework or not. They know if you have a handle on the two teams. We are being watched globally. We are the presentation of MLS in more than 108 countries throughout the world. That's not a responsibility that I think is insignificant. It's something that I carry with me into the booth, and it means a lot to me every time we get set to do a game. Whether 5 people are watching or whether 5 million people are watching, it does not matter to me. You owe it to the audience, and you owe it to the people that you're covering.
Steve, you talked about 2002 when you started. How long do you think it took you until you could walk into the stadium and say, I'm a soccer guy now?
Boy, I never thought about pinpointing that moment until you just brought up the question right now. I guess the inflection point for me that'll come to mind is the first time I got a call from NBC Sports. Remember when they had the MLS package, and Pierre Musa, who I understand is a big part of their NFL coverage now on Sunday night, and runs the show on maybe the most watched television show in the United States.
It is.
He was the coordinating producer for soccer back then, and I was just doing my local package in New York, and it was the first little taste of national audience for me. Okay. And ultimately, they lost the package. We did some good work there. I got to work with a lot of good people, Brian Dunseth and so many others. And a few years later, they lose the contract. Fox gets it. And Jason Wormser, who was running Fox Sports soccer operation, says, we'd like you to do some games. And then conversely, ESPN, which had the package since day one, for the longest time, Chris Alexopoulos was the coordinating producer there and calls me one day asking me to do it. So when those phone calls start coming and you get the national work, the best way I could describe it, John, I didn't need that to validate myself, but it feels probably the way to me that the player feels when he gets a national team call up to the United States, hey, okay, all right. Somebody out there likes what I'm doing. They might be out of their minds, but somebody out there likes what I'm doing.
Bless their hearts,
Yeah.
the guys who watch, the women and men who watch, and the women and men who hire you. That's your important group.
And you know what the advantage I had, John? This is something I probably should add. MSG Network in New York, the production was always top notch. It very rarely went cheap. So you're coming at it with some of the best producers, some of the best techs who get you on the air every week. And I think that goes a long way towards, the entire image probably.
We talked about hockey, and you basically had to give up your job as the play-by-play announcer for the Devils to to go in, jump in with Apple TV. Is that correct, or how did that
I
work?
I didn't have to. There might have been a way for it to work. I did get the impression that Apple was going to offer me, or MLS was going to offer me, a pretty big package, and it was more of a life decision, John. Look, there are people like Kenny Albert there who will spend 250 nights on the road and not blink. And I was kind of in that universe for a pretty long time. There were a couple of years where I was doing a full NHL schedule, a full local Red Bull schedule in MLS, and then dancing with some national team assignments. And I did 3 Olympics for NBC. So I had a couple of those years where I was on the road for 150 nights a year. Okay. And it takes a little bit of a toll on the body. I can't even tell you if I've called my last hockey game to this point as we have this conversation in 2026. But I made a life decision to kind of dive headfirst into this project. I wanted to do that because I believed in it. And right now, I think it was the right way to do it, to kind of not alter my attention in so many different directions. And I think what it goes back to is, your kind words about Danny and I. If I wasn't there every weekend, that relationship that you complimented a moment ago might be a little different.
There isn't anybody who was broadcast for a local team or had a partner in broadcasting who doesn't appreciate that, because
Yeah.
that chemistry, that feeling, that time you spend, not just in those 2 hours, but the travel and the talk and the get together
Mhm.
for dinner the night before or whatever your ritual
Yeah.
is invaluable. It is irreplaceable in doing good work. You mentioned Kenny Albert, and I've been a fan of Kenny Albert for a long time. He's so versatile. He does a lot of different kinds of sports. His portfolio is a little different. You do hockey and soccer. His portfolio a little bigger, and I think a national audience appreciated Kenny's work on the gold medal. Well, all the hockey, but the gold medal game against Canada. Probably a lot of people who didn't know him and wasn't familiar with his work.
Yeah, and if you don't know Kenny, if you had asked him to, in addition to all of the hockey that he was calling, to stop and call an NBA game at 3 a.m. from his hotel room in Milan, he would have done it, and it would have been seamless. Some guys are just cut that way. He obviously had a mentor who was one of the greatest of all time, and his dad, Marv. But he's never, ever used that as a crutch. And I've known Kenny for 30 years, probably longer. We're both New York guys, obviously. And from day one, he's always been the hardest worker. I don't think there are any secrets to the Kenny Albert success. He is constantly working to get better and always working at the craft. And it was just such a joy to see him day after day after day, just nailing the important calls on some of the most important games he's ever going to do in his life.
Boy, and you can't think about how many people are watching, or even as long as
Yeah,
we've been doing this, you might
yeah.
get freaked out. Couple of things before we go, Steve. Good luck on getting home, that the snow will be at least moved far enough so you can get to your home in New Jersey when you're done calling the Salt Lake game this weekend. And before we go, I'd like to ask you this. What is the biggest story besides Messi? What is the biggest story? What is the biggest thing you look forward to in Major League Soccer in 2026?
All right. So you threw the wrinkle in there in 2026. I was going to say the calendar change
Okay, that's
in
fine. And beyond, that's
2026,
fine. Yeah.
which kind of kicks in
Hmm.
next year. And that might not be the sexiest conversation that we can possibly have on this platform, because maybe a lot of people simply don't care. But Lionel Messi was just the beginning. If you move away from Messi, there's going to come a point, whether that's a year from now, 2 years from now, or 3, where he's not on the field anymore. And that is no longer the draw for this league. So the groundwork that gets laid as you move to the calendar that most of the world is working on, I think, John, you're going to see a more steady flow of some of the most recognizable names in the world coming to the United States of America to play. That might begin this summer with Robert Lewandowski coming and making a move to an MLS team. There are all sorts of rumors about Chicago being a landing spot for him. I would not dismiss the possibility of Cristiano Ronaldo playing a year here before he hangs up his boots. So I think the calendar change is going to put our calendar in terms of transfers on the same page as the rest of the world. And that's going to remove a lot of the red tape as sporting directors and general managers construct their teams. That's one of the great joys for me, John. From 2002 to 2026, the product has just gotten better for a myriad of reasons. Are we all the way there yet? Of course not. We're not one of the top 5 leagues in the world, and we probably shouldn't aspire to be there anytime in the next year or two. However, it's all moving in the right direction. The graph is going up.
Boy, you think it's improved since 2002. My first broadcast was in 1996, and the quality of the game since then is just amazing. World Cup next year. MLS takes not this year, in the next few months. World Cup takes a little time off. Do you have any World Cup assignments, or do you just get away and catch
No, I'm not going to be doing the games for Fox. I'm not getting away either. I'm working on some things that are not finalized yet, just in terms of coverage of the tournament. So unfortunately, I've just got to leave it there for now.
That's okay. No problem. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
John, thanks for having me. Be well.
From the West Coast, this East Coaster spending a little bit of time with us. I'm John Shrader. This is the Soccer Media Podcast. We hope to see you next time.